After 15 years of work, I quit, causing chaos in my father's company and financial problems because my father favored my younger brother over me. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. When I walked into my father's office and handed him my resignation letter, I watched 15 years of free labor crumble his empire in real time. The man who built a multi-million-dollar construction company on my back while treating me like hired help suddenly realized he was about to lose everything. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I brought down the family business that never treated me like family. It started when I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree and dreams bigger than our small town. Dad's construction company, Mitchell & Sons, was thriving. The irony of that name still makes me laugh. Sons, plural, when he only had one son, my younger brother Jake, and me, the daughter he pretended didn't exist when it came to the family legacy. "Sarah, you know this business inside and out," Dad told me on my first official day. "I need someone I can trust to handle the finances, client relations, and day-to-day operations." I was naive enough to think this meant he saw my potential. What it really meant was he found someone desperate enough to work for peanuts, while he groomed his precious son for the throne. Jake was 18 then, more interested in partying than working. While I was pulling 60-hour weeks, managing payroll for 50 employees, negotiating contracts worth hundreds of thousands, and basically running every aspect of the business except signing the final papers, Jake was finishing high school and planning his college years. But I didn't mind initially. I loved the work, loved seeing our projects come to life, loved the respect I earned from our contractors and clients. What I didn't love was watching Jake get credit for my innovations during family dinners, or hearing Dad brag to his friends about his son's brilliant business strategies that were actually mine. The breaking point started building 3 months ago when Dad announced Jake would be graduating early from his business program and coming back to take his rightful place in the company. "Jake's going to be taking over the client acquisition department," Dad announced during our Monday morning meeting. I felt my coffee turn cold in my hands. Client acquisition, the department I'd built from scratch, where I'd personally developed relationships with every major contractor in 3 counties. "Dad, I've been handling client relations for 8 years, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Our client retention rate is 94%. Why change what's working? Because Jake needs to learn the business from the ground up, and clients prefer dealing with family." The way he said family while looking right through me was like a slap across the face. Jake, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. "Dad, maybe Sarah and I could work together on this. She knows way more about—" "Nonsense," Dad cut him off. "Sarah will train you, then transition her responsibilities. It's time for the next generation to step up. The next generation. Singular, not generations." The message was crystal clear. That afternoon, I sat in my office, the same office I'd occupied for 15 years, staring at the wall covered with awards and certificates. Outstanding Contractor Relations, Business Excellence Award, Innovation in Construction Management, all bearing my name, all representing my work, all about to be handed over to someone who'd never even read a construction contract. I started paying closer attention to conversations I'd previously ignored. Dad talking to his golf buddies about grooming Jake to take over. Mom mentioning to her sisters how proud she was that Jake was finally ready to carry on the family tradition. Even our receptionist, Linda, casually mentioning how exciting it was that little Jake was going to be running things soon. Little Jake. The same Jake who still called me when he couldn't figure out how to change his oil. The same Jake who'd failed his first business finance class twice. The same Jake who, just last Christmas, had asked me what accounts receivable meant. But the real gut punch came 2 weeks later. I was working late, as usual, when I overheard Dad on a phone call in his office. The door was slightly open, and his voice carried clearly down the hallway. "Yes, I understand Jake doesn't have the experience yet, but blood is thicker than water, if you know what I mean. Sarah's been a tremendous help, don't get me wrong, but this is a family business. Always has been, always will be. Jake's the future here." There it was. After 15 years of building his dream, I was just tremendous help. Not family, not the future, just help. That night, I went home to my apartment, the same modest place I'd lived in for years, because I'd been reinvesting my small salary into the company instead of my own life, and I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I cried. Not the pretty, delicate tears you see in movies, but the ugly, soul-crushing sobs of someone who just realized they'd wasted 15 years of their life on people who saw them as disposable. But somewhere between the tears and the empty wine bottle, something else started building, something that felt dangerous and powerful and absolutely necessary. The next morning, I walked into work with a plan. I started documenting everything. Not just my daily tasks, I'd been doing those for years, but everything that proved how integral I was to every aspect of Mitchell & Sons. Every client relationship I'd built, every system I'd implemented, every process that ran through me. The results were staggering, even to me. I wasn't just managing the business. I was the business. I controlled all vendor relationships. The concrete suppliers, steel distributors, equipment rental companies, they all dealt exclusively with me. I had personal relationships with decision makers at every major client. The Morrison Group's massive shopping center project, I'd negotiated that deal personally. The city's new community center, my proposal, my presentation, my contract. But the real revelation came when I started mapping out what would happen if I simply wasn't there. Jake didn't know any of our vendors' names, let alone their contact information. Dad knew the big picture stuff, but hadn't handled day-to-day operations in over a decade. Our project managers were excellent at their jobs, but they reported to me for coordination and resource allocation. The accounting system? I'd designed it. The scheduling software? I'd implemented and maintained it. The client database with 15 years of relationship notes and preferences? I was the only one who knew how to use it properly. Then I discovered something that changed everything. While organizing files for Jake's transition training, I found contracts I'd never seen before. Hidden in Dad's personal filing cabinet, which I only had access to because he'd asked me to find his insurance papers the week before. Our 3 biggest clients, representing nearly 60% of our annual revenue, had contract clauses I'd never negotiated. Clauses that specifically named me as the primary point of contact and gave them the right to terminate if their designated representative was no longer with the company. My hands were shaking as I photographed every page. These weren't standard contracts. These clients had specifically requested these clauses because they wanted to ensure they'd continue working with me personally. Dad had agreed to terms that essentially made me irreplaceable, then proceeded to plan my replacement anyway. I confronted him that afternoon. Dad, I found the Morrison Group contract, and the Westfield Development contract, and the Palmer Industries contract. His face went pale. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been planning to fire me while knowing it would cost us our 3 biggest clients? That you've been hiding the fact that these companies specifically requested contract language to keep me as their primary contact? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up, my voice rising for the first time in 15 years of working for him. You've been so determined to hand everything to Jake that you were willing to destroy the very relationships that keep this company profitable. Dad sat back in his chair, and for the first time, he looked old, defeated. Sarah, Jake is my son. This company is his inheritance. And what am I? What have I been for 15 years? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. He couldn't say it, but we both knew the answer. I was expendable. I always had been. That night, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to Marcus Rivera at the Morrison Group. We'd worked together for 6 years, and his company was our biggest client, representing almost 30% of our annual revenue. Marcus, it's Sarah. I need to give you a heads up about some changes happening at Mitchell & Sons. What kind of changes? Please don't tell me you're leaving. You know our contract specifies. That's exactly what I'm calling about. I wanted you to hear it from me first. My father is transitioning my responsibilities to my brother, and I'll be leaving the company soon. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, Sarah, you know we can't continue this partnership without you. It's literally written into our contract. We specifically negotiated that clause because our board only approved this relationship based on your involvement. I understand completely. I just wanted to make sure you had time to prepare. How long do we have? I'm thinking 2 weeks. The second call was to Jennifer Palmer at Palmer Industries. Similar conversation, similar response. Their quarterly infrastructure project was worth $800,000 annually, and they'd made it clear from day one that they were working with Sarah Mitchell, not Mitchell & Sons. The third call was to David Westfield at Westfield Development. Their residential projects kept 12 of our guys employed year-round. Each conversation ended the same way. Disappointed clients expressing that they'd have to find new contractors and asking if I planned to start my own company. I haven't decided yet, I told each of them, but I'll definitely let you know. But I was lying. I'd already decided. That weekend, I drove to the city and met with a business attorney. By Monday morning, I had articles of incorporation for Mitchell Construction Services, LLC. Not & Sons, not & Daughters, just my name, my company. Tuesday morning, I walked into Dad's office with 2 letters. One was my official resignation, effective in 2 weeks. The other was a business proposal. What's this? Dad asked, his face already red as he read my resignation. A solution. Mitchell Construction Services is prepared to subcontract all major client relationships for Mitchell & Sons. You keep the company name, the equipment, the employees. I take the headache of client management off your hands, and you pay us a contractor fee. Jake still gets to run the family business, just without the stress of dealing with demanding clients. It was a generous offer, too generous, but I wanted to give him one last chance to choose family over pride. He didn't even finish reading before he tore both letters in half. You're not starting a competing business with our clients, Sarah. I'll sue you for everything you're worth. With what grounds? Non-compete agreements that you never made me sign? Client relationships I built independently? The reputation I earned with my own work? You can't do this to us, to your family. I stood up slowly, looking at this man who'd watched me pour my heart into his dream for 15 years without ever once considering that I might have dreams of my own. I'm not doing anything to you, Dad. I'm finally doing something for me. The next morning, I submitted my resignation to HR, officially. By lunch, word had spread through the office. By evening, 3 of our best project managers had asked to speak with me privately. But the real fireworks started the following week. When the Morrison Group's cancellation notice arrived, Dad burst into my office at 7 in the morning, still in yesterday's clothes, holding the Morrison Group's cancellation notice like it was on fire. Fix this, he demanded, slamming the paper on my desk. Call Marcus right now and fix this. I looked up from my computer, where I'd been updating my LinkedIn profile. I can't fix it, Dad. I don't work here anymore, remember? As of yesterday, I'm officially no longer an employee of Mitchell & Sons. Sarah, please. This is $8 million in contracts. The Palmer cancellation came in last night, and Westfield's lawyers called an hour ago. You're destroying us. I'm not destroying anything. I offered you a solution. You tore it up. Jake appeared in my doorway, looking panicked. Sarah, what's happening? Dad's been up all night making phone calls, and clients are saying they won't work with anyone but you. I felt a moment of pity for Jake. None of this was really his fault. He'd been raised to believe he deserved something he'd never earned. But he hadn't asked to be the golden child any more than I'd asked to be invisible. Jake, those clients have contracts that specifically name me as their required point of contact. When I leave, they have the legal right to terminate. It's business. But surely you can convince them to what? Work with someone they've never met? Trust their million-dollar projects to someone who doesn't know the difference between load-bearing requirements and cosmetic specifications? Dad's face was getting redder by the minute. You planned this. You sabotaged us. I planned nothing. I simply stopped pretending that 15 years of free labor was somehow a favor I was doing for you. I stood up and started packing the last of my personal items. Those contract clauses? You signed them? Those client relationships? I built them through my own work. This situation, you created it the moment you decided Jake's inheritance was more important than my contributions. The phone rang. Linda's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Mitchell, there's someone from Johnson & Associates here about the downtown office building project. Dad looked confused. I don't know any Johnson & Associates. I smiled. That would be my new client. I'm meeting them in 20 minutes to discuss their 50-unit residential project. I picked up my box of personal items and walked toward the door. The conference room's available if you need it. Sarah, wait. Jake's voice stopped me. What if? What if I stepped back? Let you run things the way you always have? For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered 15 years of being treated like an employee while he was treated like a prince. Jake, even if Dad agreed to that, which he won't, it's too late. I've already signed 3 major contracts with Mitchell Construction Services. My business, my name, my future. Dad followed me to the parking lot. Sarah, please, think about your mother. Think about the employees who depend on this company. I turned around one last time. I thought about them every day for 15 years, Dad. Every budget I balanced, every crisis I managed, every client I kept happy. I was thinking about all of you, but you were only thinking about one person, and it wasn't me. As I drove away, I saw him standing there in the parking lot, still holding that cancellation notice, finally understanding what he'd lost. Within a month, Mitchell & Sons had lost 60% of their contracts. By month 3, they'd laid off half their workforce. Jake tried calling me twice, but what was there to say? Today, 18 months later, I'm sitting in my own office, not Dad's office, not a borrowed conference room, but my office, with my name on the door and my vision on the walls. Mitchell Construction Services has 15 full-time employees, all people who chose to work for me rather than settling for working under me. 3 of Dad's best project managers joined my company within 6 months. Linda, the receptionist who'd watched me build that business from the ground up, gave her notice and became my office manager. Even some of the contractors who'd worked exclusively with Mitchell & Sons started bidding on my projects instead. My company landed the contract for the new hospital expansion downtown, the same project Dad had been pursuing for 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on me when the selection committee mentioned that they specifically wanted the Mitchell who actually knows construction, not the one who inherited the name. As for Mitchell and Sons, they're still operational, barely. Dad had to sell the building and downsize to a small office space. Jake's running day-to-day operations now, and from what I hear through industry connections, he's actually working hard to learn the business properly. Too little, too late, but at least he's trying. Mom calls occasionally, usually to ask why I had to be so dramatic about leaving. She still doesn't understand that this was never about drama. It was about respect, recognition, and refusing to be invisible in my own success story. Dad and I don't speak. I see him sometimes at industry events, and he looks older, smaller somehow. I don't take any pleasure in his struggles, but I don't feel guilty about them either. Every choice has consequences, and he chose pride over practicality, tradition over talent. The most satisfying moment came last month when the Morrison Group offered me their largest contract ever, a mixed-use development worth $22 million. Marcus Rivera shook my hand and said, "We knew betting on you was the right choice. Best decision we ever made was putting that clause in our original contract." Jake sent me a text on my birthday last month. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." I never responded. Some apologies come too late to matter, but arrived just in time to confirm you made the right choice. Looking back, I realized that Dad was right about one thing. Mitchell and Sons was always meant to be a family business. He just never understood that I was family too. Now I have my own family business, built on merit instead of birthright, success instead of sentiment. Sometimes the best inheritance is the one you create for yourself. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stayed and fought for recognition, or walked away to build something new? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening to my story and for understanding why sometimes you have to lose everything to finally find yourself.